So this is our third topic. So as you can see, transforming resources into goods and services. We've looked initially at where business ideas come from. So that was topic 1. We've then looked at protecting those ideas using things like patents and trademarks. Now we're looking at how those ideas can be turned from ideas into reality. If you haven't already done so, then the first task is to look at in your yellow workbook, page 22, and it should have a self-assessment in there. So how do you feel about the first topics? Do you feel happy? Do you feel indifferent? Do you feel unhappy about it? That will help us with your revision. It'll help us understand how much of the previous topics you still understand. In terms of what we need you, or what you're going to have to be able to understand by the end of this topic, all of you will be able to define what we mean by input, output, transformation process, and added value. All of you are going to be able to apply these words to real life examples, so you'll see where these fit into real companies and to exam questions, and that's how you'll know you'll be able to understand this and you'll be able to do this, because you will be able to answer exam questions at the end of this. So in class you're going to get some pictures of some businesses as a prompt, but if you're looking at this outside of class, I want you to start thinking straight away, what resources do you think businesses actually use? And I've told you at the bottom here, a resource is essentially the elements or the things that go into producing goods and services. So I'll give you an example. Greggs, for instance, when they are making a sandwich, the resources that go into making that sandwich might be the bread, there might be some meat. They also could be the person making that sandwich. So think about, what resources do businesses use? We need to look at how those resources are used then by businesses, and that's all part of production. So businesses making something to sell. We don't always mean that it's something tangible, it's not something you can hold in your hand. It could also be a service. So as you can see here, production is the transformation of resources, so changing things into goods. Now goods are things we can hold, so an iPod is a good, a book is a good, or a service. So a service could be something like a mobile phone contract. So how do we turn things into goods or services that we can sell? So there are a number of stages in that production process. The first one being an input. So an input in this situation is something that contributes to the production of a product or a service. So here we have a fishing boat, it could be a cow, it could be some farmland. So something that can be changed, if you like. The output is the end result, so something that occurs as a result of the transformation of business inputs. So unfortunately, Mabel the cow becomes a burger that we can sell. And in between that, in between inputs and outputs, are the processes. So these are the methods used to convert the raw materials and components into the outputs. So a process converts an input into an output. We very much like categories in business studies. So we're going to see if we can categorize the inputs that a business has into something called factors of production. So the first one we're going to look at is land. So the first factor of production is land. This incorporates all the natural resources that can be used for production. So say for instance oil, wood, fish, livestock, they're all classed as land. So the term land incorporates all the natural resources that can be used for production. Obviously land in the traditional sense is included on this heading, but also things such as I've said, natural and mineral resources, so coal, oil, and livestock such as sheep and pigs. It also includes the sea and resources contained within it, so as I've said, fish. The second factor of production is labour. So here I've got labour involves both the physical and mental effort involved in production, involved in making things. It therefore ranges from people providing personal and commercial services such as accountants and window cleaners to those who provide manual effort in producing finished goods and extracting raw materials or harvesting crops. So here we have people harvesting rice, we've got people moving building blocks, and a gentleman here thinking. He's making a decision, for instance. The third factor of production, so the third way that we categorize our inputs, is what we call capital. So goods that are made or used in order to produce other goods and services. So for instance, it might be machinery, might be computer systems, shelves, lorries, forklift trucks, factories, shops, office blocks. So anything that we use in order to transfer or convert an input into an output. So here we have an earth mover, the Shard, an office block in London, or some computers. The third and final factor of production is what we call enterprise. This is the act of bringing together all the other factors of production. So enterprise is carried out by the entrepreneur. They make the decision and they provide finance. The entrepreneur takes the financial risk and therefore earns the profit that can be made from converting the inputs into the outputs. So here we've got a decision being made, we've got finance being raised, and we've got a risk being taken. So in class, what you're going to do now is, or what you're going to do in class, is a task relating to the 6 companies that I gave you. So you told me what resources they needed in order to make their products. Now I want to know how they could be categorized into the 4 factors of production. So now what we're going to do in class is we're going to look at this video here, and we're going to look at what the inputs are, what the outputs are, and what the processes are. If you're watching this and you're going back because you've missed the lesson in class, then obviously follow this link and you can do this activity as well. But when you're watching this in advance, this is what we'll be doing in class. So a little recap. Inputs. These are resources that can be broken down into land, labour, capital and enterprise. Remember, that's what we call the factors of production. That is something that you could get asked as an exam question. Name the 4 factors of production. Don't get caught out by not remembering those. The outputs, these can be both goods and services, but it is what basically businesses produce. It's what they sell at the end. There are 3 main categories of our outputs. We might be in the primary sector, the secondary sector, or the tertiary sector. Now, what do you understand by these sectors? This is something that we've looked at, or you should have looked at, in your notes in advance of this. But it's something we will come on to in a later PowerPoint. But think about what do we mean by these primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors. In between inputs and outputs, we have this transformation process. So how a business turns inputs into outputs. It's important to note that a customer might be another business that requires a product, such as metal or cloth, which in turn will be used to make further products. Customer requirements may also be for a service rather than a good. The vast majority of production in the UK takes the form of services rather than goods. You'll see in a second that hasn't always been the case, but most of the businesses that we have in this country don't actually make goods anymore, they produce services. So when we change inputs to outputs, as we say, it's this transformation process. The purpose of the business is to produce goods or services profitably, so they want to try and make some money. In order to achieve this purpose, a business must acquire inputs, so collect these inputs, convert them into outputs. All of these activities are part of this transformation process. So inputs, transformation process, outputs. Some inputs are used up in the process of creating goods or services, such as coal is used up to create electricity, oil is used up to create petrol. Others assist the transformation process but remain intact. An office block, for instance, assists the transformation process, but it's still there at the end of it. In general, land in the form of raw materials is used up during the transformation process. In contrast, capital equipment, for instance, remains intact, but constant processing means that will eventually need to be replaced. So eventually, when we use a computer, it will become out of date, it will become worn out, and we'll have to replace it. The other factors of production, such as land, labour and enterprise, all remain active, ready to be used in further production. However, the business must be careful that it does not overuse these resources, and this may lead to lower levels of efficiency in the future. That's where you might have heard the phrase sustainability to do with business. If we overuse our resources, if we overuse our inputs, they might not be around for us in the future, therefore where do we get our profit from? In the tertiary sector, The transformation process focuses directly on the customer or the consumer. No physical product emerges at the end. So a holiday, for instance, you can't hold a holiday in your hand. It's a service, not a product. But the consumer may emerge from that holiday with a happy smile, or leave a hairdresser with a new hair colour and style. That's the output. You can't hold it in your hand, but it's still an output. So production can vary significantly in terms of the mix of the 4 factors of production. So how much land or capital we need. Technical operations, so making cars, for instance, might mean a lot of capital. Personal services, such as a hairdresser's, might mean a lot of labour. Now you'll see here I've added to this diagram feedback as well. So the final part of the transformation process is feedback. Feedback of information is used to adjust this process in the future. For instance, a retailer might rely on feedback from its customers about the quality of its goods and services. So adverse feedback on the product might lead to a retailer switching to a different supplier. So if we buy apples from Asda and those apples are always bruised or they don't taste very nice, that feedback might be given back to its supplier, and Asda might say either give us better apples or we'll go to someone else. Favourable feedback on customer care may encourage the retailer to maintain its customer care training, which might improve things in the future. Now, as I say, we're going to look at something to do with sectors. So in class you're going to be given some photos that represent either the primary, the secondary or the tertiary sector. So you're going to put those into sectors. Then I'm going to get you to look at drawing a line graph. Once again, if you're going back to this because you've missed the lesson, then that's what you should be doing next. The information is on the next slide. So there's the information that you need to draw this line graph. Once again, if you're watching this before lesson, this is what we're doing in class. If this is after lesson, then you should be drawing this graph. Next task that we need to look at. It's all very well saying that there have been changes in the primary, secondary and tertiary sector. Earlier I mentioned that there was a lot more primary and secondary industries previous to now than there was tertiary. Now the majority of what we do in this country is in the tertiary sector, the service sector. So I'd like you to think about why. So I've given you a little writing frame there. Again, we'll be doing this in class if you're looking in advance of the lesson, so you needn't do that. If you're looking back at the lesson because you've missed it, this is what you've missed in class. So I would like you to fill in these paragraphs, and do put in as much detail as you can. Remember, examiners want you to show that you understand something, and that usually comes from the amount of detail that you put in, not putting it in as few words as possible. So the number of people working in it might be primary, secondary or tertiary sector, has risen or fallen, and then from a date in here to a date in there. So a number, then a date, a number and a date. And because. So we want a reason why. Why do you think employment in the primary sector has fallen? This means that. So it's fallen or it's risen. This means that this will happen. And because this has happened, it will lead to that happening. That's what we call a chain of argument. We'll look at that in more detail as time goes on. But you've got to say, because this has happened, it means this also might happen, which will lead to something else happening. It's these chains of argument that the examiners like, and it's these chains of argument that will get you good grades. So the price of the finished product minus the cost of resources. That gives the added value. So just to recap, added value equals the price of the finished product minus the cost of resources. So let's look at in a little bit more detail how we can actually add value then. So we've said that the building company, in the example of the house I gave you before, adds value by building that house for you, by turning those inputs into outputs. What other ways can we do it? Well, there we have a t-shirt. There we have another t-shirt. 2 black t-shirts made more valuable by the addition of a logo, by adding a brand. A McDonald's burger. A burger in the Malmaison Hotel. That burger is probably £4. As you can see there, that burger is £15.95, purely because it's served in the Malmaison Hotel. People pay more because of the high quality surroundings. It probably costs them the same to make as a Big Mac, but they've added £10 more value purely because of where it's being served. Here's a game on the iPhone. So Words with Friends, installed, that was free. Words with Friends, £1.99. Why? Because the one that I've got installed has the adverts at the bottom. The one that I haven't got installed is the one that doesn't have the adverts. So it could be that you pay for extra features. Potatoes. Chips. As I said, we could buy our own potatoes, but we pay McCain to transfer those chips into oven chips. We could do all of these stages ourselves, but it would mean growing the potatoes, it would mean harvesting them, peeling them, cutting them, frying them. That would be cheaper than buying a bag of chips, but we can't be bothered to do that, so we ask McCain to do it for us. By doing that, McCain add some value to those potatoes. So, just summarise those. We can offer customers several alternative methods of payment by, for example, credit cards, debit cards, money transfer, cheque or cash. We can offer customers the facility of purchasing a gift voucher, so we make it easier for them to give to their friends or family. Companies like Tesco, they add value to what they do by giving us a loyalty card. So every time we buy something in Tesco, we get a little bit back. Or we can offer our customers special discounts or special promotions. We can give them extended warranties, so rather than if something goes wrong after 1 year, in John Lewis for instance, they say that if something goes wrong after 2 years, you can bring it back. So you'd rather go there than somewhere else. They've added value to that product. We can provide customers with reliable after-sales service of the product, so cars are often good with that. So if anything goes wrong, you can bring them back and they can sort it out, even if it isn't something that's the fault of the car. It could be that you get the option of purchasing add-ons or upgrades. So that's it. A good example of that are the in-app purchases. When you download an app for your phone or for your iPad, you can often get new features by buying them in-app. As we've said before, it could be that we've got a brand, so a reputation for quality and value that customers are prepared to pay for. So Nike trainers sell for much more than high tech, even though the production cost per pair are probably pretty similar. So Nike add value to their trainers by having that Nike swoosh on the side, by having a strong brand. You can add value by delivering excellent service. So as we said before, the Malmaison has a burger that's £15 purely because they have high quality service. By having good product features or benefits, so if we add functionality of different versions of software, can enable a seller to sell higher at a higher price. So for instance, Microsoft Office sells a student version, it also sells a business version. The student version doesn't have as many features, so that is less expensive. We add value, or Microsoft adds value to Microsoft Office by putting more features into the business version. It can charge more. It offers convenience, so sometimes you might pay more for a tin of peas or a bag of potatoes from your corner shop because it is convenient. It means you don't have to go to the local supermarket. It's easier for you, and we pay a little bit extra for that